So as we were growing the business early on, and I was very interested in tracking the numbers and creating metrics and dashboards and things like that, we evolved all of our different metrics into an Excel spreadsheet that was called the Vital Stats Dash. And I recommend that you create your own Vital Stats Dash. Dave's in the back over there. He wishes that that would go away forever because he is the keeper of the Vital Stats Dash. In fact, Dave's going to come up here and talk to us all in a little while and tell you stories of spending hours with that beast of a spreadsheet. But one of the great things that the Vital Stats Dash did for us was it allowed us to have a view of the whole company in one shot. And I could look at it and see all of the different things that were happening. And at that time, we were looking at things on a more granular level on a daily basis. And now we've rolled a lot of these things up, and for management reporting, we look at some higher level types of reports that are also very important, and I'll tell you about those. But what I'd like you to do, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this, in this session we're going to talk about becoming what I call business instrument rated. And I got the term from you. And I got it because Guy is a pilot, and he has a cool plane. And Guy and I, boy, we worked together 10 years ago or something like that, 10 years ago. And you were one of the first people that signed up for Altitude, which was fascinating. We hadn't talked in a little while. Anyway, maybe a couple of years ago or something, we went for a ride in your plane?
Yeah, 2 years ago, I think.
2 years?
Uh-huh.
Yeah? And so Guy had me put on the headphones and taught me about how the avionics worked and was showing me all this cool stuff. And he said, I'm going for my instrument rating. And I said, well, what does that mean? And you want to just share what being instrument rated as a pilot means and why you get instrument rated?
Well, yeah, I mean, it allows you to basically fly in conditions where you can't see outside the cockpit. And, this is really important because, your body will play tricks on you. Mm-hmm. And if you're unable to see outside, you have no idea, no concept of which way is up, down, or whatever. And you've got to be able to fly by the instruments and trust them. You have to be confident that what you're seeing on the screen or in front of you on the dash is, in fact, what's really happening. And so it just adds a much higher element of safety and allows you to make approaches in, sort of zero visibility conditions down to certain levels.
And what can happen if you're not instrument rated and you can't see what's going on?
Well, yeah, you can be flying the airplane, inverted and doing all kinds of weird things, and essentially, fly them straight into the ground. All kinds of bad things. You can sure wings or whatever.
That's probably bad with a plane, huh? From what I hear.
Not good.
I remember I was saying to Guy, I said, what happens if the motor stops on this thing? And he said, it's not too bad as long as you don't run into trees. I said, that makes sense to me. Now, a lot of plane crashes happen because visibility goes down quickly, and the pilot doesn't know how to fly the plane by the instruments. And they go into, like, I've heard about, what is it, it's called a death spiral or something, where you feel like you're straight up, but you're actually spiraling, and how does that work?
Yeah, graveyard spiral. Depending on the conditions, let's say, if you're flying over the water, and, Kennedy is, like a famous example of that. Clear night, lots of stars over the water, can't tell which way is up or down. And, they start losing altitude, and next thing they know, they start pulling back on the yoke, thinking they need to climb. But really what's happening is they're, sideways and going in a circle. And as they pull back on the yoke, you go faster and faster and get a tighter and tighter sort of circle. And you just fly the airplane right straight into the ground.
That's bad.
Not good.
Kind of in that whole good, bad thing. It's more on the bad side. So what's the process of becoming instrument rated? Just what are the highlights?
First is really to, learn really what the instruments are telling you, And also to know that when certain instruments fail, how are you going to be able to check the accuracy and be able to tell what the airplane is doing based on the lack of the other instruments? This is very important, you know, how to control your airspeed and altitude and navigate using all the equipment in the airplane and things outside the airplane also.
Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing
You
that.
bet.
So, I surprised him at the beginning. He had no idea that I was going to ask him to share that information. After he explained it to me and we went up flying and we were talking about it, I thought, well, that's exactly what you need to do in business. Is you need to become instrument rated so you can look at your instruments and know how the business is doing. So in this section, we're going to talk about becoming business instrument rated. Here are a couple of quotes for you. Data are most valuable at their point of origin. The value of data is directly related to their timeliness. Lawrence Miller. When you have mastered the numbers, you will in fact no longer be reading numbers any more than you read words when reading books. You will be reading meanings. And one of the things that people that don't use charts and dashboards and visual displays of quantitative information, one of the things that they don't know is that once you start using it, it stops becoming just lines, and it starts becoming like an EKG for your business. It starts telling you how healthy your business is. And if you have a dashboard, if you have a vital stats dashboard, and you have a set of metrics and charts that are showing you what's going on, you can look at it and you can say, like David said, hey, the daily lead count is starting to drop, and you know what? It's not coming back up. Something's going on. So let's dig in there, and let's call up the daily lead manager and see what they think is happening. And you call them up and they say, oh, you know what, something's not getting counted in there. Let me just fix that and send it back. And you go, okay, no problem. Or they say something like, well, let me check that out. I don't know what's going on. I saw that too, but I thought it was this other thing. And then they call up and say, oh, you know what? One of our partners just decided to take our ad down because they got a better offer from someone else. We better have a little huddle and see what this means to the business. And if you didn't know that, you could go on for a long period of time. Or maybe one of your campaigns, maybe you have a Google AdWords pay-per-click campaign going, and it's big and complex, and you're not really tracking it day to day and moment to moment, and the stats start going down, and 3, 4, 5 months later, all of a sudden your business isn't performing as well, and you have no way of figuring out what happened. There's no way to go back and track all that stuff. Then you discover that the AdWords campaign isn't working out. You don't know how long it hasn't been working. Is this all making sense? If you have the right metrics that are showing you what's happening, when one of them goes sideways, it's not about going into Excel and then moving the line back up. It's about saying, oh, that means something's wrong, or that means something's right. Wow, something's performing very well today. Let's dig in. Oh, look at that. What happened there? Oh, let's call up our partner and see why we're getting more traffic from them today. Oh, they launched this other thing and they just gave us some banner space for free and it really works. So that's great. Maybe we can get that permanently. So we refined our visual tracking into this thing called the Vital Stats Dash. We created a little slide that was I made a simplified version. And what I did is I went back into our kind of history as a business. I took a random 90-day slice, and I said, Farmer, strip this down so that it's not all the different charts and all the different metrics, and just give us 4, so you can see what something like this might look like. And you can see that there are 4 columns of numbers. It's obviously very small, but this is what it is. On the left-hand side, it's all dates, right down the left-hand side. Just the date, 90 days in a row. The first column is our bank balance, your checking account balance. In this particular period, things seem to be going well because the checking account balance was going up over time, over 90 days. The next chart was the daily cash deposits. The next chart was what we call our net cash, and I'll explain that to you in a moment. And our next chart was our daily expenses. And if you look at these, and you see I think he ran a 7-day moving average through these, you can see that there are cycles. Do you see the cycles in the numbers? So in the bank balance, you see it goes up for a little bit, and then it drops off, and then it goes up for a little bit, and then it drops off. What was going on there? Right, we were paying our bills every 2 weeks, it looks like, right there. I can just see by the amount of time that goes between them. Looks like we were paying our bills about every 2 weeks. Drop off, drop off. Daily cash deposits. What was going on there? Well, you can see there were 2 heavy days, and then 3 days that were a little lower, and then 2 that were at 0. I know because I know our business that was Monday and Tuesday that were the high deposit days. Why were Monday and Tuesday much higher than the other 3? Because of the weekend. The deposits from the weekend were going in, right? The net cash is a metric that I literally invented, and I probably wasn't the inventor of it, but I made it up for us. And what I said is, we got to figure out where would we be at. It's kind of like a mini accrual method of looking at your value. If we were to even up all the money we have coming in and the money we have in the bank and all the money that we've got to write checks for in the next 30 days or so, where would we actually be? What's the real value? What's the real cash value of our business right now? And this one takes a little bit of time to actually figure out. But I want to know, did we write $700,000 worth of checks? And I don't really know that it's not reflected right here. And we don't want to install a big accrual accounting system and go through all that hassle to balance the AP and the AR and all that stuff. This net cash. We actually still use a version of it to this day, and it's been very valuable to me. If we just settle up everything that's happening right now, where are we really at? Where do we really stand? And expenses, this is an interesting one to track on a daily basis. If you've got a credit card that you use for everything, you either pay by a couple of credit cards or checks, you just have someone log in and put the expenses in every day and then run a moving average through it. You can see the cycle that we're going through. And you can see that when you smooth it out, you get a very consistent chart. Now, if you don't know what's going on in your business, let me rewind for a second. I like these metrics, right? Bank balance, cash deposits, net cash, expenses, very simple financial numbers here. I haven't tracked back to any of the marketing, or this is not sophisticated. But if you don't know any of this stuff, and once in a while you're just looking at the bank balance online and you're thinking, how much do we have to write in checks, and asking someone how much how much is payroll and whatever, you have no way of knowing whether or not your business is stable. You don't know if it's going up, you don't know if it's going down, you just really don't know what's happening. Most, and I use a lot of these terms because I don't have specific numbers, but most of the entrepreneurs I know, if I said, can you show me something like that chart? Do you have anything like that? They just say, no. And I say, well, do you have a feel even for what's going on? And they say, not really. We seem to be making profit because we're surviving. I think we kind of spend about this much and we kind of spend about that much. Now, how long does it take to build something like that thing that I just showed you? Really, how long does it take to build something like that? Let's say on a daily basis, if you did it every day for 90 days and you had someone, they just put all the dates down the left side and they filled in those 4 boxes. How long does it really take to gather that data every day? Minutes? A few minutes. You log into a couple of terminals, you have someone on your team just do it, and you say, here, put these 4 numbers in these boxes. Now, who doesn't have something like that for their key metrics in their business? Raise your hand if you don't. Okay. And who does? I'm interested. Okay, good. Now, for those that don't, how would you feel if tomorrow, if this was your chart, this just showed up in your email tomorrow, and you knew that every day you could just open this thing up and glance at it and see what's going on? How would you feel? How would your gut feel? Relief, maybe a little more peace about your business, a little more certainty. So, let's say you have someone on your team that does some administrative stuff and, they make $10 an hour and it takes them 30 minutes to do this thing every day. Let's say you have them do it for 30 minutes. Is it worth $5 a day to be able to just glance at the thing and go, all right, everything's cool, everything's normal. The instruments are reading that we're doing fine. I'm going to tell this story more later. Maybe I should just tell you now. A couple of years ago, I think it was about 2 years ago, we spent a lot of money over 2 months that we didn't have. Something to the tune of $450,000. 450 grand. And it happened because I had made a couple of metrics and set a couple of kind of limits for how much we could spend and where we could go, and I just hadn't connected the people up and the teams up right. And all of a sudden, our guys that were buying ads said, "This is great. We can just blow this out," and they just started going crazy and doing a great job at it. But cash flow was such that it would have killed us. Well, I was watching the numbers, and at one point I said, "Uh-oh, I see something coming that could be very bad." Now, the challenge was that we were spending the money, and our guys were doing such a great job that they were negotiating terms. So the money wasn't actually going out, it was just being committed. And because of the way that we were counting it, and again, some of my own total oversight in the way I was thinking about it, it wasn't apparent to anyone. And we had to cut spending very quickly. We had to pull in the ropes. We had to call up a couple of our partners and say, "Hey, would it be okay if we send you the check in 2 weeks?" And it worked out. We didn't have any kind of disaster. We averted it. But I will tell you what, if we did not have the charts to look at the numbers, it could have been a very bad situation. I don't think that it would have killed us, but I think that it could have caused us to have to let several of our people go. It could have set us back really far. And what was interesting is that it was almost like flying with one of the instruments that was missing, because I had made some mistakes in the way that it was being set up and the way it was put together. It was just, I didn't have experience. I didn't understand the types of things we were doing. We were really coming into a new level of the business. I really believe in having a vital stats dash. Now, you're going to hear other people talk about this during the program, but I'd like you to start one with just your basic key metrics. Okay, so if you don't have one of these, get out Microsoft Excel and start a vital stats dash. You can do it with, maybe just take some of your basic metrics, your basic numbers. You can start with how much money is being deposited into your bank account every day from sales, and how much money is going out of your bank account every day in expenses. Chart just those two numbers to start and see the rhythms. It's fascinating when you don't realize that you have that much regularity in your business. It's that stable, and then you see it and you think, "Oh my God, I had no idea that that's what was going on. I didn't realize that there was a rhythm to it and a flow, and that it had that kind of stability." Or it might be crazy and headed for the ground or coming up, and you might say, "Wow, I didn't realize how unstable the process was." And I think that you can grow your business by accident, right? By just doing things that work and then saying, "Okay, well, we got a great product or service and we've got customers that are buying it, and it seems to be doing pretty well. So we'll just keep doing what we're doing." And I think of that as almost growing your business by accident. But at some point, you're going to reach a level of complexity where you can't manage it all anymore. You can't take it all in one glance. Your mind can't monitor all of those different processes. And at that point, you need to either evolve into having a business model, a model of your business that is in numbers, that's simple to understand, you can understand it at a glance, or you're getting into really dangerous territory where you're playing with magnitudes that you could really get in trouble with. In business, there are only a few key places that you really make money and that you really spend money. I would wager right now that there are fewer. Does anyone in here have more than 10 ways, 10 main ways that they make money? Raise your hand if you have more than 10 main ways that you make money. Raise your hand if you have more than 5 ways you make money. Okay, so that's probably 80 or 90% of the people have 5 or fewer ways that they make money. Okay, good. Raise your hand if you have more than 10 major expense categories in your business. Major expense categories. More than 5? More than 5? Okay. So I'd say that one was probably about 70% have 5 or fewer main expense categories. So one of the things that you could do is you could sit down and say, what are the main ways we make money? Maybe we have 3 products. Well, make a chart of how many of those products you're selling every day. Very simple. Let's say you have 5 main expense categories. How much money you spend on people, how much money you spend on marketing, how much you lose to refunds and bad debt, how much you spend on technology, whatever those big categories are, and make yourself a little chart and track the numbers. Maybe you do those numbers weekly or bi-weekly, or it doesn't really matter. Remember David was up here and he said, when I first started here at this company, we started and we kind of screwed it up a little bit, fudged it, and it didn't quite work out right, the numbers didn't work out right. That guy screwed it up at the beginning. Right? You're learning about the process by setting these things up. Part of learning to read the meaning is you being the one to set it up. The first thought that would come to most entrepreneurs' mind, I think, is, you know what, I'll have someone do that. I'll just say, hey, set this thing up, and then tell me if one of the numbers looks weird. This is the heartbeat of your business. This is the internal, it's like the visual display of a complex process that's happening. You want to get very familiar with this. Two metaphors for you. There's a book called Reminiscences of a Stock Operator that was written, I don't know, 80 or 100 years ago. And I'm not a trader, but I read the book because it's apparently the Bible. It's like the original manual on investing, and it was fascinating. And one of the stories that it tells is the guy in the book, when he was young, I think he was a teenager, he worked in a parlor kind of environment where they traded stocks. And this was the old days where the stock quotes would come over the wire, and he would go over to the wire, and men would sit around tables and drink beer and trade stocks. It was kind of like a social event or something. I don't know exactly how it worked, but he was the guy that would, when he was a teenager, he would go over to the wire, get the stock quote, and then walk over to the board, and he'd put it up there in chalk. And after doing this for a while, he started to realize that there were patterns, and he got an intuitive sense of what was happening, and it got to the point where he would recognize certain cues, and he'd just say, that stock's going to go up. Because he had programmed himself with the rhythm. He learned to read the rhythm of the market, and he went on to become very wealthy, very successful trader. Another one is this bizarre phenomenon, this company, this product, service, whatever you want to call it, called Twitter. And Twitter is this thing where you go in and you send these one word or one sentence, these one line ideas out and say what you're up to, what you're doing. At the car wash, reading a book, hanging out at Starbucks with Fred, and you just send these out to your little network. And when it started, everyone looked at it and said, that's just stupid. Why would you just mention what you're doing? And I thought it was crazy. I thought it was ridiculous. Well, it took off and got a lot of fans. And then I read an article about it. And the article fascinated the hell out of me because it said, this guy said, I went to check out Twitter and I thought, well, what's all the hoopla about? This just seems weird. Why would you just send out one sentence messages about what you're doing a few times a day to your little social circle? And he said, after doing it for a week, I'm completely hooked. And he said, you can't understand it until you do it. That something happens. Once you have monitored the daily rhythm of someone that's close to you that you care about, you eventually start to get a sixth sense about them. They say, I'm at the coffee shop talking to Fred, and you know all of this other stuff, what that means. Oh, so you probably left work a little early, and then you went and did this. And they know what's going on with you. Does this make sense? You can't know what it's like until you experience it. And by using the visual display and by programming myself, by checking the data on a daily basis and looking at the numbers and getting a feel for the rhythms of our business, it's like a power that I think we humans have that we don't really turn on and use very much. It's like literally holding your finger on the pulse of someone and getting used to their pulse, and then all of a sudden you feel it start beating faster, and you think, wow, something's going on with them. You can have an intuitive sense of what's happening. So I think that we all have this ability. I just don't think that we cultivate it. I don't think that we learn it. You're instrument rated now. So you can fly in just about any kind of condition there is, if you're crazy enough, I imagine. Well, now that you're instrument rated, is it a different experience flying the plane? Do you know more about what's happening? Do you have more of an intuitive sense of what's going on? Deeper. Yeah, deeper level of what's going on with the aircraft, exactly. And a deeper level of what each instrument is representing, and I'm sure what they all mean together when this one's happening. And there's always another level of subtlety. But the point is that our brains can handle these levels of abstraction, and as you start growing your business, you're gonna lose touch. It's gonna become too complex, and you're gonna need some kind of systems to read. So start simple, just start simple. One of the great things I learned from Ralph on our team is that even if it's not accurate, as long as it's consistently inaccurate, it's okay. Because you're looking for trends. Let's say that the numbers are off 20%. They're always off 20%. They're always low 20%. And you don't know if it's 20% or 10 or 17 or 25. You really don't know, but you know it's off somewhere in there. But it's consistently off. You're okay. Because you can spot the trend. Oh, things are going down. That doesn't look so good. Things are going up. Let's check on that and see what's happening. Does this make sense? Yep. Good. So measure every campaign for ROI and connect every spend with its return. I really think that we're at a point in business where there's enough technology available at a low enough price, and even if that technology is Microsoft Excel, that you can track back every expenditure in marketing, every expenditure on people. You can track it back in some way to the results that you're getting. So measure all those dollars that you're spending. Again, counterintuitive for a lot of people. How do you pay people? What do you do? Well, you figure out how much it would be worth to have them get a certain result, and then if they get it, you say, hey, I made a good investment. If they don't get it, then you show up and you say, hey, we're not getting the return we need here, so we have a couple of choices. We can have you work on something else, or pay you less, or maybe help you find something else. It's all about exchanging those values. Emotional estimation and seeing only validation play into this world as well. When I try to dig into a person's business, when I say, hey, let's talk a little bit about your metrics. Could we look at some of your sales history, or how do you do during these months, or how does this lead generation process work? A lot of times I sense in the voice of the person that I'm talking to that they almost feel like, no, you don't understand. I understand my business. I get it. I know what's happening. I know when it's healthy and I know when it's not. And they're like defensive about this idea of, I don't want to have someone come in here with their numbers and their accounting stuff and screw up the good feelings that happen in here when we do things intuitively. I know what's going on in my business. And seeing only validation, not looking at actual data allows us to always be right in our heads. When you don't look at the actual data, you can always be right in your head. You don't ever have to be wrong. And the way you can be right all the time is when something goes the opposite of the way that you planned it, you can rationalize it and explain it and say, oh, you know what, I was right about that thing before. See, I used to think that other thing, and then I changed it because I was right. You've seen this before a couple of times, huh? The capacity that humans have to rationalize and explain and come up with stories and somehow make it so that we were right the whole time is phenomenal. So it's obvious that not knowing the numbers could lead to bad things. Okay, that's kind of obvious. If I don't know what the numbers are, it could be bad. But it's not as obvious that not knowing my numbers could prevent me from scaling up and growing the business. Right? It's a little more intuitive, like, okay, yeah, maybe something bad could happen. But it's not as obvious, it's a little more counterintuitive that, wow, if I get the numbers tuned and I know what they are, then I'll be able to grow my business more efficiently. And that's an important aspect. Another thing that's important when you're working on metrics and you're building a dashboard is to figure out what the metrics actually mean and get definitions together. This is a project that we went through about, I don't know, 6 to 12 months ago. Had a team of people because we realized that internally we were using terms and different teams thought the terms meant different things. And it was rather shocking because we had been using these terms for years and it was like, okay, so wait a minute. You're not counting refunds in the SOS and we are? How does that create a disconnect? Well, if you're, let's say you're buying advertising and one person's counting it one way and the other one's counting it another way, there could be like a 10% gap there or something in the difference of how much money we're really making, and over time that could be significant. So we started locking down what our terms really mean. So once you come up with a metric, try to describe it and make sure everyone on the team is on the same page. And if you ever get the feeling like you're communicating with another person on your team about a metric and you're on different pages, just say, hey, stop for a minute. What do you think this metric means? Here's what I think it means. Let's make sure that we have a connect. Some of the terminology and metrics that we use that are important to us, that we use a lot, that sales on spend that I mentioned earlier, we spend this much amount of money, this much amount of money. English much? We spend this amount of money, how much money do we get back in sales? And we have two variations of the SOS. We have what we call the front-end SOS, which is, in our business, we do e-commerce. Visitors come to our website, they either buy or they don't buy. Front end is how much they buy on the first visit, the front end. And then the back end SOS is how much they buy on the back end over time. And then we have the same with cash on cash. Now, with cash on cash, because almost all of our business comes from credit cards, and because there's a delayed process in getting leads and them turning into money, that one is done over time as a profile. Cancels and refunds, profit and profitability, and that thing that I mentioned before, the net cash, kind of our current cash position. If you settled everything up that's happened over the last couple of weeks and everything into the future, kind of where do we really stand? Is there anything that's been spent or committed that we don't really know about? And always remember that you're looking for trends. There will be physical variation in any system. You're looking for the trend to be going one way or the other. I think it's also important to track the lifetime value of your customer. It's becoming more and more well-known and more common, but I'm still blown away at how many businesses just don't even think in terms of lifetime value. And they don't think in terms of, okay, well, we get leads from Google, and we spend $10 on a lead, and we make $50 over 6 months, and the $50 is the lifetime value, and we run these ads over here, and we get customers we get leads for $5, and their lifetime value is $100, and they don't even know that. They just have no idea. And because both of them are kind of working, they're like, well, okay, well, this month maybe we'll spend a little more on Google because whatever, or this month over here. They don't understand that when you compound these flips of the money over time, that it can equal some big differences. So if you're going to set up some instruments to navigate with, I recommend you think in terms of 3 levels to start with. Okay, 3 levels. One is kind of a daily vital stats dashboard. And you might put anywhere from 3 to 10 daily metrics on there. And these would be things, like I said, very simple to get started. How much money are we spending every day and how much money is hitting the bank account every day? You might put how many new leads you're getting. You might put your total sales volume. You might put your refunds and your cancels. Whatever is important to your business, the Vital Stats Dash. The next would be daily and weekly updates from team members. If you have a really small team and it's you managing everything, it might be a good idea to get them to do a 5-minute daily update for you at the end of the day. And maybe they've got 1 or 2 little charts that they're responsible for, and they update it and they drop it in that, and you get to see what that update looks like, and you can keep your finger on the pulse. It's also a good idea, by the way, once something gets to the point where it gets too complex and you need to roll it up into another chart, have another person manage some of those other data sources so that they can learn the lessons. So that daily vital stats dash, and then the weekly and daily updates. And then ultimately, you need to do a more in-depth analysis and more in-depth projection, where you sit down maybe on a monthly basis or bi-weekly basis, and you have someone really take all of those charts and do an analysis of them. On our different teams, we have usually weekly team reports where the team leader will sit down and take an hour or two and take all of the numbers for the last 90 days, put them up and say, here's what happened, here's what's going on, here's some of the changes that we're seeing, here's the explanation for that blip over there. And everyone can look at it and say, okay, that makes sense. And anyone on the team can say, hey, something looks like it's going weird over here. What is that? And then we answer, and we all have this common language. So start with the vital stats dash, move to the daily and weekly reports, including some of those metrics, and then move on to the more advanced, in-depth reporting. Something I just realized that I neglected to share with you is how our business is set up. Seems kind of obvious to me. I work there. In our world, we have 5 teams. This is the way our business is constructed. I'm just doing this on the fly. We have 5 teams. We have our operations team. That's our biggest team. 29-ish people there. We have what we call our IS automation team. That's our technology team, and that combines our developers and our IT folks, people that work on our technology, and also our email deliverability folks are over there too. By the way, our technology team, our IS automation team, about 10 people. Content team, Farmer and Colleen, about another 10 people. Anything that we release that's printed, content, products, that kind of thing. Next team is our marketing team. This is our newest and our smallest team. This team is growing. We probably have, depending on how you look at it, let's just say about 5 people on that team right now. And we call it the marketing team. They are responsible for the internal marketing. After a lead comes in and they're in the door and they're in our system, selling our products to them. So they help structure the offers and send out the email newsletters and promotions and all that kind of stuff that we do. And then the final team is what we call subscriber acquisition. And that's kind of our external lead generating team, and that's about another 10 people. And those are the ones that call on companies, do partnerships, do pay-per-click, manage affiliates, all that kind of good stuff. You know, there are probably a few more than that on each of those teams right now. Those are the approximate numbers.